Hope there's people out there listening. Hope you're ready. This is kind of an exciting one. Going down the path of people that I've admired and respected within the industry that do things that are not the same but similar to some of the stuff we do. Wines of restraint, etc., etc. We're going to speak today with Adam Tolmach, who most of you out there should know. If you don't, he's been in the industry quite a while. I will let him talk about it a little more, but he's in the world of Bob Lindquist and Jim Clendenin and the Foxen Boys and that world. So a wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience, more in Santa Barbara, of course, than Paso Robles. I'm not sure he's ever made wines from grapes from Paso Robles, but we'll delve into that a little bit once we get going. I think at this point we're going to taste a couple of his wines, a couple of Tablas wines, as usual, a white and a red from each producer. I'm really excited about his wines, always have been. Haven't spent as much time with them as I think that I should have, particularly tasting. I had a pre-tasting, I will confess, particularly the Sauvignon Blanc. But I spent an afternoon with Adam and his wife, I believe Helen, at his tasting room in Ojai, actually the day that I became a United States citizen. So it was a celebration day for me. I'm not sure he knew that, but we hung out in the tasting room in Ojai and tasted a bunch of his wines and brought a bunch home. And one of them is the red wine we'll taste today, the Sans Soufre, which on the night that we tasted it blew every other wine off the table. And it was not the one that was expected to blow everyone else off the table, but it did. So it was super exciting. And that really is a large motivation for this conversation. So with that, I think we'll have Ian bring Adam to the table. Hey, Adam.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. You hear me now?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Well, thanks for joining me. And
sure.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor to have you on the other side of the computer here. So, I would assume that, assuming anyone's listening to us, most of them will know who you are and where you've been. But I always think it's good for you to lay down a little bit of your history. I mean, go as deep or as shallow as you want, but I'm sure you've said this many times, and just let people know a little bit. I mean, I know the Jim Clendenin connection, and I'm going to guess there's some Zaca Mesa business in there somewhere. I don't know, but let's let people kind of know where you started, and then we'll wend our way through this. And by the way, Sauvignon Blanc is beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Now, so what's on the label of the Sauvignon Blanc? Because I was given information about it, but I wasn't exactly sure what they were talking about.
It is the Santa Barbara County Sauvignon Blanc, Portico Hills, 2018.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's what I thought it was, but somebody sent me something and it was a typo, so it was hard to read.
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. That's great. Let's see. So to start in the beginning.
Who is Adam Tolmak?
Yeah, right. And so, when I was growing up, I grew up in Oxnard, California. And as I was growing up, my folks drank wine with dinner, which is a little bit unusual in that day and age. And somehow that gave me a little bit of a bug about wine. And then in high school, I was brewing up any kind of wine I could possibly brew up because alcohol was of interest in high school. And and then so just sort of happenstance wise, I decided that when I went to college, I wanted to go to an agricultural college, and and I got into Davis for whatever reason, and so I have a viticulture degree from there, and I took sort of all the undergraduate wine classes I could, and absorbed as much as I could. And the wine program kind of got me through college because it was, I'm very kind of nuts and boltsy and not very, and not very. I mean, I love reading, but I abstract things or or difficult for me. But just knowing the connection between, Chem 1A and wine chemistry, made chemistry okay. So I could pass the class along with everybody else who wanted to become a medical doctor. And then, so let's see. So I ended up after college growing fruits and vegetables on my grandfather's property here in Ojai for a couple of years, and it was a lot of work. I mean, it was really a huge amount of work, and nearly profitless. And then I decided, well, I had to use my degree and try to get a job, and so I got a job at Zaca Mesa.
I knew it would be in there somewhere.
Yeah, and then so that's sort of where I met Jim Clendenin. He was the first employee, and I was the third employee there under Ken Brown.
And Lincoln was there too, right? At some point,
he came a little bit later, but only just a few years later. He became the tasting room manager or something like that, and then blossomed into a winemaker. And so Jim and I started Au Bon Climat, which was we got this idea from living in the area that, actually quite cool climate Chardonnay and Pinot Noir could be something of real interest, because mostly people weren't dealing with anything from, kind of the Santa Maria or Los Alamos area that was considered too good for quality grapes. Too cool for quality grapes. And so we, after spending a season in 81, working in a small Burgundian cellar at winery, and just doing the harvest. Jim got this job through Becky Wasserman, because he'll talk to anybody, and asked me if I want to come and help. And so I jumped over there and picked grapes on my hands. In 81, it was a little bit wet. It was pretty miserable in the vineyard, but it was really, it was a trip. There you are, a mere youngster, like picking grapes as fast as you can, and these Portuguese ladies who are like 65 were going like 45 times faster than you possibly. And they were, they had these knives that, were sharpened on every way, so that they could just like clip and go and go and go. And when I tried things like that, I ended up cutting myself up.
Yeah, no doubt.
And anyway, we came back. Jim and I worked at Zaca. We kind of retired at about quit at about the same time, and then met up over in Burgundy. Jim had worked the harvest in Australia, and I had planted a little vineyard here in Ojai on my family property in 81, and then so did the harvest. And just was entranced by the scale and the way people did things, and still probably do. It just, it was very small scale. People didn't work 18, 19-hour days all through.
Isn't that a trip? That was one of the biggest things. I did a year at Bocas, Chateau de Beaucastel, coming right out of Ken Volk and Wild Horse and all that business, and went to France, and it was 5 o'clock, and they all went home at harvest, and I just couldn't get my head around it at first, and then it became quite reasonable to me.
Yeah, well, and this was a whole little mini domain de la Duc de Magenta, and he was a real duke. Mm-hmm. And the wine's sort of available. I think Jadot makes those wines now, but it was just an incredible experience. So yeah, first thing in the morning, there's not much food around, and there's some old men in the corner drinking what they called petrol, which was it was their coffee with some Marc de Bourgogne in it, and that was all sort of amusing. And then you'd go out there and you would pick, and then there'd be casse-croûte, where you'd have a little bite of something to eat and a glass of wine right out in the vineyard. Somebody had this little milk bottle carrier filled with wine bottles, and we'd have little sips of wine, and you'd pick, and then there'd be an incredibly elaborate lunch that would take at least 2 hours, probably quite a bit more. And then then you'd finish up the day afterwards, and and come back for a pretty elaborate dinner at this place. And it was, whatever so they were whatever feeding the pickers, or like 20 odd people, and it was really a lot of fun, singing traditional Burgundian drinking songs. And of course I don't hardly speak French, but it was fun to sop up all the atmosphere. And then afterwards, and so anyway, from that whole experience, and then afterwards, we went around and toured places in Burgundy through Becky's connections, and I was just so amazed. There were. I remember we visited this one cellar that was like extremely modern and really amazing, and the wines weren't really very good. And then we visited people who just had the most primitive of cellars, and some of them were good and some of them were horrible, but it was amazing to me that you didn't need like high tech in order to make great wine. What you needed to think a little bit. And
it's changed some. My son did a harvest in Burgundy a couple of years ago, and it still was very different as far as technology is. Well, no hot water and things that you take for granted here, but the wines are incredible and beautiful wines. So it, like you're saying, you realize that as long as you're thoughtful and you're careful and you think about it, you don't need everything.
No, you really don't. And sometimes some of the technology, as you've seen, I'm sure, here and there, people kind of latch on to one sort of thing or another, and like that's the greatest idea. Like when adding a ton of SO2 prior to fermentation and having a long cold soak. I mean, that kind of goes into fashion for a moment, and then besides that was a really bad idea, and that's, you see that there as well as you see it here. And also, I mean, we really, there's this radio program called I'll Drink to That.
And I've heard that.
Yeah, and it's pretty entertaining, and it made me realize that I was, very much on the cusp of huge changes in Burgundy, from the interviews that this guy did, and because up until like the 70s and 80s, there were some big houses that made all the wine or bought it in bulk and made it. And there wasn't that much estate bottling done prior to then, and so it was it was a whole new world in a lot of ways. And you think of Burgundy as being ancient traditions, and of course there are lots of ancient traditions, but things kind of get looked at all over again, and they certainly got looked at all over again in the 70s and 80s, and then when I was there, the people my age and a little younger, they were all going to college, and they were they were getting college educated in wine, unlike their parents, which weren't, and so it kind of gave them a bigger worldview, and I feel like things have really really progressed and changed a lot there, and it was kind of fun. It's amazing to think back that I was sort of there as things were really changing hugely
at that moment.
Yeah.
And then back to Santa Maria Valley, or I guess, and Jim Clendenin. And when was Au Bon Climat? When was the first vintage of that? I don't think everybody knows that you were part of that in the beginning.
Yeah, and so anyway, we got back from Burgundy, and then I won't say it's the only compliment I ever received from Jim, but just to tease him a little bit if he's there. But he gave me a wonderful compliment recently, and which was that in my family, all the kids sort of just did their own thing. We're very, I wouldn't say we're entrepreneurial, but we sort of are. Not growing giant businesses or anything, but just doing our own thing. And somehow, I may not have contributed anything to Jim, but I did contribute this idea that you could just start something and just do it. Because and so we did. I mean, that's what we did. We, rubbed together a couple nickels, borrowed from family and friends, just not very much money. And then we found this old dairy barn that had been converted into a very primitive winery in Los Alamos. And so that's where we started in 1982. And we did that together for 9 years. And then, you know, Jim wanted to become huge and famous, and, you know, so he went off and did that, bought me out of Au Bon Climat, and then sort of simultaneously, or really at the same time, I started the Ojai Vineyard from estate grapes, which were Syrah, and Sauvignon Blanc. And then, so that
why the steer away from Pinot Noir? Was that just to separate yourself from Au Bon Climat a little bit, or just to change your passion?
That was, you know, that was in the beginning. You know, I did both things at once for a while, for 10 years.
Okay.
We started Ojai in 83, and then we started Au Bon Climat in 82. So it was sort of simultaneous.
Okay.
And so and down here in Ojai, it's a little warmer. Pinot is not the thing.
Right.
And so, so that's what happened. And so then when I retired from Au Bon Climat, then I started making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay as well down here in Ojai.
Okay.
Purchase grapes. Yeah. And then, so I guess the reason I'm talking about Burgundy and working there is that for me, I just love the scale. The tiny scale, because, you know, people there, I mean, a 5,000 case winery is a pretty good sized winery there. And, you know, certainly probably most everybody is under 10 or so, or not all, but a lot of them are. And I like that hands-on scale. I like the, you know, kind of that craft scale. I really enjoy that a lot. And so that was sort of my driving force for, you know, for separating off from Jim and just kind of doing my own thing, keeping the scale small, keeping my hands dirty. And I guess it just suits me. You know, I mean, everybody, you know, you can make really great wine at a pretty large scale too, but it suited me to have it small. And
yeah, he certainly did a good job of getting massive and doing a good job of what he did. Jim Clendenin. Au Bon Climat is a really well looked upon label, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think Jim does a great job. And he's doing it, you know, his way, and I wanted to do it my way. And, you know, we both are pretty strong personalities in our own way. And so for me, it's always been about keeping it, you know, small, crafty, constantly learning. That's what it's all about for me. It's like, you know, there's a lot to learn in wine, you know, and the knowledge comes really slowly. You know, you do it, whatever, you know, for instance, kind of getting to the wine that we were talking about, that you were talking about, was that Sans Soufre that we made, which is a, you know, wine made without any sulfur addition. I did that really just for the challenge of trying to make a wine that was sound and could be drunk for a few years. And we started that project actually in 2011. And the very first Sans Soufre wine we made was 100% Syrah from Sebastiano Vineyard here in Built, you know, kind of halfway between Buellton and Lompoc. And so that wine, the current wine, is a half blend of Syrah and Grenache from there. And but the very first one was 100% Syrah, and so we made the wine, you know, no sulfur additions at all, and then we bottled it in August prior to the next harvest. So we bottled half of it, and then we stopped the bottling line, and then we added a small amount, 40 parts per million of SO2 to the rest of the tank, and then bottle that. And so we had these two wines, one with and one without.
This is the 11 vintage?
This is the 11 vintage. And so
how do they taste today?
Yeah, well, just a few days ago, I was able to taste them together because, you know, I'm kind of an inveterate saver. And so, you know, our place here is pretty small, but we have a warehouse down in Ventura that's all refrigerated, and we just have a massive amount of wine down there. little bits of everything, just for the curiosity of seeing how they get along. And so I was sort of shocked because the with and without had really evolved, as one would expect. But what was shocking was the Sans Soufre wine, the one without the sulfur, was just incredible. And the one with the sulfur was good, but the one without the sulfur was just amazing. And it's definitely pretty flamboyant, but I wouldn't say it's tour. It doesn't have, it has plenty of fruit. It's not like a mature tasting wine, although it's, definitely has quite a bit of maturity. But it was pretty stunning. And so, I mean, that's part of my point of, of craft, is that, these things come really slow. When we first bottled it, the one without the sulfur was a little more forward, but maybe a little on the aldehydic side or something like that, or just, a little less precise. The one with the sulfur seemed more precise, more correct. Seemed like, they were both good in different kinds of ways, but I had no idea of how they'd really turn out with time. And so I'm even today, here it is, 10 years later, and it's like, that's pretty interesting. So, so now the new idea now for the day, and I love new ideas and doing new things, is that I think Soufres will do just pure Syrah, and maybe that's what we'll make from that's maybe our Sebastiano Vineyard Syrah will just become the Sans Soufre, and just keep it simple. And
how much do you make of the Sans Soufre?
Oh, not much. Couple hundred cases. So okay. we're talking small.
Is that number gonna go up as of yesterday's tasting?
It's a real niche market, and it's something really hard to explain. And so, I mean, not that we're very good marketers, but we've idled along at about, whatever that 200 to 250 case range for this particular wine. And that's been fine. And there's a lot of people who are kind of afraid, in the market to buy something that's, advertised as made without sulfur, because, so many wines that you buy like that are, they can be good, but they can also just be weird science experiments that don't taste good. To me, wine.
Yeah, I think there's room for more of that. We're certainly playing with it, probably inspired by your stuff. I mean, I've always been intrigued, but we're in our second vintage of 100% Syrah. That I don't know that we'll bottle it as such. But it certainly shows really, really well against the other wines in the tastings that we do. It's in our particular case, it's one we're doing. It's a biodynamic, everything picked on the day and barrels and all that. But the most intriguing part for me is the fact that we're not using any sulfur. And obviously, we picked Syrah for obvious reasons. It's pretty reductive anyway. But
right,
there is definitely a difference in the wines. I mean, I'd love to taste old ones like that. I think some with some age to see how they evolved. I mean, I would. If it were mine, I'd be worried when I was opening those bottles, what was going on in the bottle with no sulfur. But I mean, certainly what I've tasted from what you're doing and some other people that are doing it right, and that's the thing. I mean, I would guess you're pretty meticulous with that wine on the way to bottle.
Oh yeah, I mean, we test it for Brettanomyces and other things. We're quite cautious with it. Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage of having a little bit of experience, is you know what can go wrong. And so you try to avoid that as much as possible.
Things have gone wrong before.
In the wine business, it's kind of funny. I've been doing this since whatever, my very first vintage was 76, as a sugar tester at Ojai Vineyards, but where I didn't have much control over anything. But I have been making wine since then, and what's shocking to me is that you can come up with a vintage, whatever, in any particular year, and it's like, huh, that's never happened to me before. What does this mean? And it's like, oh my gosh. And, because you have been doing it for a while, usually you can, be on top of it before, like the wine completely turns to beer or something like that, because like, oh, this is happening. Let's like pay attention here. People don't always, when you're new at it, you just don't know what to do.
There was a great statement that one of the owners of Boxtel, Jean-Pierre Perrin, said to me once when I was angsting over something. His comment was, Neil, we learn about this much every year, and we can just hope that we get to use it again. That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, it really does. And that's the fun. That's the craft of winemaking. What's so thrilling about it, and how it never gets boring, is that
absolutely.
Every
year is
all these things, and it's every year is different because every harvest is different, the weather's different. So it's really, that's the thrill. I love it.
Great work for a restless mind, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's taste your wine quickly before I forget to taste all the wines. Why Sauvignon Blanc? Where did that jump? Was that because of a great vineyard site and a relationship, or just a love of Sauvignon Blanc?
When I started the Ojai Vineyard, and I planted a little vineyard on family property here, I planted Syrah because in the early days I'd gone to, Kermit Lynch Wine Merchant and just fallen in love with Northern Rhone red wines.
Yeah.
And
Kermit Lynch is responsible for a lot in this business, it seems to me.
And then I just didn't know that much about white Rhone varietals, back then when I planted this vineyard in '81. And so I just thought, I had made wine from Sauvignon Blanc from like little home vineyards in the Ojai area. And so I thought, oh, well, that stuff's pretty good. It's interesting and distinctive. And so we've actually made Sauvignon Blanc, since 1983. And so
from the same vineyard.
Well, we did from our own vineyard, but we lost our vineyard here in Ojai to Pierce's disease in 1995. We pulled it at that point, and so, but we continued on purchasing grapes, Buttonwood Farms in San Ynez, and then God, what's it called? Westerly Vineyard, which became McGinley Vineyard, since 1998. We've been doing those continuously. And then so just recently, I've been thinking a lot about Sauvignon Blanc because, I love Sancerre and, good Sancerre anyway. And so I got thinking, in my experiences with Sauvignon Blanc from cool climate areas, Santa Maria, for instance, have been pretty negative because in the old days, people, didn't know how to grow grapes, and it took a long time to grow the right way. And so those wines were like all really gagariferously green. And so I just lately, I've been experimenting with tiny little lots. The Portico Hills comes from Los Alamos, which is quite a bit cooler than the Happy Canyon area of San Ynez, where McGinley is. And so that has sort of brighter acidity and zippy and interesting. And then since then, we've also experimented with Presqu'île Vineyard, which is in Santa Maria, and they're doing a terrific job growing grapes there. And I love that wine. That's fun. And so
that's an impressive spot.
Yeah, and so it's just been, the continued pursuit, and Sauvignon Blanc's one of them. Yeah, so the Ojai Vineyard, we make, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Syrah, and Sauvignon Blanc. And then there's also the various other things, Riesling. Riesling, yeah, Riesling, love of Riesling, dry style Rieslings. And so, yeah. And so anyway, I loved your wines, by the way. The white, which name, what is it?
Picardan. Give us a quick, before we get on to the Picardan, give us a quick thought. What do you get out of your Sauvignon? What should the legions of listeners be looking for?
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that bottle I didn't open tonight, but
You've had it before, though.
yeah, I've had it before. It's quite crisp. Lots of acidity, all natural, of course. Very simply made. It's older French oak barrels. We block the malolactic fermentation to keep it quite zippy and fresh. It's very lemony, lightly herbal, roundish just from the barrel fermentation, but zippy and tight and minerally at the end.
It does have roundness, but with no expression at all of any wood on it. To me, it's and beautiful. The finish is beautiful, mineral and lemon peely acidity. It's super cool. Really, really beautiful wine.
Yeah, I love barrel fermentation. I don't care for new barrels very much for most varietals. I love what barrel fermentation and barrel aging can do, but dislike kind of those overt, strong oaky smells that you can get if you use a lot of new wood. And so this course is done in all very old barrels.
I kind of like those oaky things in other people's wine. I don't like it in our own stuff, but I do like to taste it in people that do like it and taste what they're doing with it. I find it intriguing, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm fine with oak as long as it's, for me, it's all about having the vineyard speak, tasting the wine and having it taste like the spot. And so if it's overdone, then it's a destroyer of terroir, like the many other destroyers of terroir.
There's lots of them.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, I absolutely. And with wines of balance and finesse like these, it would be a shame for certain. So the wine that you have of ours, the Picardan. So this is one of the 14 now Chateauneuf de Pape, and it's the last wave of grapes that Tablas Creek brought in. This was one of them, it was one of the last wave. And still, we're kind of finding our feet, I think, on what it was. This too was fermented in neutral French oak barrels, and as with everything Tablas Creek, it's all organic farming, biodynamic, and all that stuff, and native yeasts and mallows, and doing exactly what you just spoke of, trying to show expression of place. That's our goal. And also in these experiments with varieties that have not been grown here before, to see what they actually do in this location, because Picardan has not seen the soils and climate of Paso Robles before.
Yeah, and I thought the wine was sensational. It was definitely a bit of lemon peel. And for me, it was also thrilling to taste in that it, like many, I don't know, many, but some other Southern Rhone white varietals, there's a certain heaviness to them. And in the way you made this wine, it doesn't show as heaviness, but just kind of a fullness of the palate that's so totally pleasant and enjoyable. The acidity, the balance was great, great freshness. But so it was fresh without being light. It had a fullness to it that I think must come from the varietal.
Somewhere we have a picture of the soil that this was grown in, which tells a story right there. That's the block that this was grown in. So really, there it is. A lot of chalky limestone and a bit of clay and sheep poop. Yeah,
and so I take it that it's a variety that that's hardy enough to do quite well in evidently extraordinarily poor soil.
Yeah, exactly. It seems to be. I mean, it's kind of it wasn't really our choice, but as it turned out, these last wave of new clones and varieties, the only piece of land we had left at that time was really, really one of the most rocky places. So they'll make great wine, but it's not a great nursery block, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, and maybe that's why this varietal shows so well from you. It really is a delicious and stunning wine.
I mean, it's been one of the most interesting things for me to get to play with these things and see varieties that have never been here before. Over the last whatever 5 years or so, I've got to work with Terre Noir, Vacarès, Picardan, Claret Blanche, and the last one in the ground, which I haven't. Well, I made 5 gallons of, or we made 5 gallons of, I should say, last year, is Muscadin. So it's just intriguing to say we know what they do at Boxtel because they've been growing them there for ever and ever, and I mean, or presumably they know what they are. I'm not super familiar, but I do remember liking Picardan when I was there. It's just interesting to see what they express in our soil, in our climate, in this place, and like you said, it takes forever to learn these things. So probably maybe that's not the best soil on the property for Picardan, but I'm pretty happy with the feel, the texture of this wine. I think is better than I thought it was going to be more simple than this.
No, that's what's thrilling about it. It's a really amazing, complete wine.
The one that I forgot was Bourbon. That's one that we're growing, which still trying to figure out what it's going to be, but it's really exciting. And it was the one that Jason's dad, Robert Haas, was most excited of the whites. Unfortunately, didn't get to check it out on this site, but I kind of trust his judgment. So I'm thinking that we're going to see a lot of good stuff out of Bourbon coming down the road.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a really great variety. Has freshness and a lot of interest.
I'm going to reach for your Sans Soufre.
Okay. Very much in line of what you're talking about, discovering these old varietals that nobody really knows anything about here. And I find that, that kind of thing is just really thrilling. And so I'm working on a project kind of similar, only different from that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you. I know where you're going with this, and I meant to ask you to send me a bottle, but I totally blew it and forgot.
Well, we've hardly
going down the Pierce's road here, right?
Yeah, and so
this is really interesting. Listen.
Yeah. So Pierce's disease is, it's a disease that's been around California for a really long time. It originally was called Anaheim disease because, basically half of LA was planted to grapes. I mean, a huge portion of grapes in the, I don't know when that was, 1850s, or no, maybe it was later than that, 1880s or something. And there was this huge boom of planting in Southern California, and then a huge bust because there's this disease called Pierce's disease, which used to be called Anaheim's disease. It's a bacteria-like thing that is carried around by an insect, and if this insect bites the vine, then it clogs up the water conductive tissues. And it's all over. It's actually in Napa. It goes pretty far north. In Napa, it's really down in the river bottoms, right in the Napa River, right close to the Napa River. There's a lot of disease issues. And it's one of those diseases that nobody really talks about because it's just too depressing,
Yeah. Well, Randall Graham had his run-in with that, right? In Bonnie Doon.
Yeah. And the Santa Cruz area has a lot of, it varies depending on what spot, but there are a lot of spots that are really subject to huge Pierce's disease pressure. And so when you get south of Point Conception here in California, the climate is milder, and the milder the climate is, the more you have problems with Pierce's because the insects overwinter, and I don't know, it's just a more problematic thing. So like Santa Barbara City, Santa Barbara proper, it's really tough to grow grapes there because of Pierce's disease. It's tough to grow grapes in the Ojai Valley.
And this will kill the grapevine. This isn't a virus where you can live with it. It's game over, right?
Right. So what happens is these bugs, they munch on the vine, they infect it with this bacterium, and the bacterium clog up the water conductive tissues, and the vine dies within 3 years. And so, and it's becoming more and more of a problem with global warming. For instance, like the Santa Rita Hill, generally northern Santa Barbara County, where we have grapes, it's not a huge problem. But it has shown up more often. You get like a couple of really mild winters, like we had sort of
Mm-hmm.
2012, 13, 14, and lo and behold, there's some Pierce's disease problems out there, and especially in the places closest to riparian habitats where the bugs like to hang out. And anyway, being where we are in Ojai, it's just a little bit milder than up there, and so the Pierce's pressure is a lot higher. And so we planted a vineyard in 81 here in Ojai. And then, by 95, it was just a disaster. And also, I'm not very interested in insecticides. And so, there are some insecticides people use to try to stave off the disease, but I wasn't using them. And so,
this is on your own property, right?
On our own property, yeah. And so originally, I had a tiny little 5.5 acre vineyard of Syrah and Sauvignon Blanc. And then, so in 2017, I was able to get some little plants from Andy Walker, the professor at UC Davis, who's doing natural plant breeding. It's not GMO, just natural breeding, and bringing in Pierce's disease resistant to vinifera grapes. And so he's just released 5 new varietals that are 97% vinifera and 3% Vitis arizonicus, which is a native Southwest grape that carries this Pierce's resistance. And so by using modern technology, they're able to speed up the process. It only took him, 20 years or more to get to where he is today. And also just by the nature of plant breeding, you can't just like take Chardonnay, breed in, this Pierce's resistance, and then breed it back with Chardonnay again and again and again until you get 97% Chardonnay. It just doesn't work that way. I'm not much of a geneticist. It's been years since I've taken genetics classes, but you just sort of come up with new things. And just like, there's a lot of, because of genetic testing, we all kind of know where all these various grape varieties that we all love came from. And it's rather curious. You'll have one strange varietal mixed with that crossed with another. And then lo and behold, there's, Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir or whatever. And it's kind of interesting. And so that's sort of what happened with Andy's grapes. He's released these 5 varietals, and they're unlike anything else. I mean, they're sort of like some things. Anyway, so we have 4 of these. One of them's an unreleased thing, and so we have 2 whites. They're both, he describes them as Sauvignon Blanc like. One of them is quite strong, herbal, sort of Gruner Veltliner with Sauvignon Blanc-y characteristics. The other one is sort of lightly Sauvignon Blanc with a kind of Chardonnay richness, kind of like that, your white there, which I can't pronounce yet. One of these days I'll learn. And then there's 2 reds. One that's for me is kind of Grenache or maybe a little Zin-like, and the other one is almost sort of Syrah-like, but kind of different. And anyway, what's amazing about these, you've had a lot of crosses with American stock in there, and most of them are just horrible wines. These are actually pretty interesting. And so anyway, yeah. And so anyway, so 2019 was our first vintage from these wines. They're very healthy, super happy, and I'm having a lot of fun with this. It's a tiny little plant. It's a 1.2 acres divided by 4 varietals, and so we've bottled the first white, and we'll bottle the first red coming up here this month.
And do you plan to expand that acreage?
I don't know. I don't know what it's a lot of fun. And at this stage, my brother and I are doing almost all the work, along with a lot of family members who live around here. And heck, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
and so
So you've got so much work that you decided to go buy a 10-acre Pinot Noir vineyard, right?
yeah,
Just to
just for fun. I'm not
lighten the load a little bit.
I'm not farming that. I have somebody who's really a grower, and
Okay.
and so I'm participating, obviously, because I was telling you about my son and I going out trying to
Gopher guys.
lure the gophers away from the vineyard. It's all too much fun, I guess. And, but anyway, there was that's that segue to our grapes here in Ojai. I mean, it's such a trip to have these 4 grape varieties. You have no clue what to do with them.
No idea.
You don't know what they are. I tasted experimental 3-gallon fermentation batches from UC Davis. That's all I knew about.
And that doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, it
doesn't mean a lot. And so that's just been really a fun project. So sometime when you're down here, we'll taste them.
Yeah, I fully intended to ask to see if you'd bottle that to someone so we could have tasted it tonight, but I'll come down there and taste them with you because I'm super curious about that. Do they have names, or are they just Andy Walker's white 1 and white 2?
There's actually 5 registered names that you can actually put on the label. It's legal to put on the label, and they're funny. The names are all kind of plays on the word walk or walking or Walker. Yes. And so, there's Caminante Blanc and Caminante Rouge and Ambulo Blanc, and there's a number of them, and they're kind of cute. How to market them? Well, we're going to sell them, in our tasting room and to our mailing list customers.
What was the volume of white bottles that you got off?
This very first one, we made almost none, 68 cases or something like that. And the red, I think is, might be 150 cases. So
wow.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to taste those. That's pretty cool. You don't see that very much in life, something completely new like that.
Yeah. And for me, I'm not interested in, GMO solutions. And this is a, natural breeding solution, which there are a lot of advantages to that. And that, when you do natural plant breeding, there's specific genes that are resistant to the Pierce's disease, but it also carries all sorts of other genes that you have no idea about, which also confer some resistance in other ways. The resistance doesn't come from just one particular method.
And that's a long road.
Yeah. Anyway, it's all pretty. He's working on powdery mildew resistant vines as well. That'd be a trip.
I'm glad there's people that can do this stuff because it's way out of my league.
Yeah.
Your Sans Soufre is coming out of the glass, and the aromas are so powerful. It's really, really impressive.
Well, that vineyard is, John Sebastiano in the Santa Rita Hills is just, it's a fabulously good vineyard. Syrah and Grenache just do really, really well there. I'm super excited.
I love this wine. This wine is so, there's a gamey meatiness to it, the kind of graphite character. It's just really, really supple. Yeah, it's soft and supple, but has weight. It's really, really cool. It's very savory for me.
Yeah, it's super savory. I find it quite peppery.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of cool climate character to it. Really fun wine. Everything that we've made from that vineyard has been pretty amazing.
Did you find that the sulfur makes the wines side by side a little more angular?
Yeah. Definitely. You might, in a positive way, you might describe it as precise. I just remember early on some wine critic that tasted it here at our place. He found that these are an earlier Sans Soufre, a really early one. He found that thought that aromatically with the sulfur, the wine was more correct. Like the pepperiness was sort of more right, and somehow the aroma on the one without sulfur was a little more like diffuse and confusing. But then now that same, actually that was the 2011. But now tasting that 2011, I'm pretty convinced that just about anybody who tasted the two would say, "Gee, the Sans Soufre is the way to go."
Yeah, I mean, this is what are we looking at here? This is the 2018. I should show people this.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's not our regular label. Ours is a diamond-shaped label. It says the Ojai Vineyard.
Yeah,
this was sort of my. I mean, it's not my art, but it was my idea of like, hey, I think this stuff's really neat. Let's put it in a different label and see if that helps us somehow. And
is this right to the market, or is this a tasting room only situation? Or
I mean, there's a little bit of there's probably a lot of interest out there in a sulfur-free wine, but we haven't been able. Somehow we haven't tapped into that very well, so we sell it mostly directly ourselves.
That works. That works well anyway. All right.
Yeah, and so yeah. And then, it was thrilling to taste your Grenache as well.
Grenache. I just put that in my glass. 2018 Grenache.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever get.
Yeah. And I love the way Ryan Peace just said hello there. Nice. And
hey, it's his birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, Ryan Peace. I happen to know that Ryan Pease had a 2019 Tempier Rosé and a 2006 Chateau de Beaucastel for his birthday lunch today. So with a steak frite. So not a bad day for Mr. Pease thus far.
Yeah. And I visited, I think, practically the day after he had his second child, I think, and up there in Paso, and that was. I heard great things about him and his wines from one of my employees, Nick Krankel, who he's a real fan of kind of the Paso area.
I wouldn't believe the great things about him, but his wines are good. He's doing great work with Mourvedre, and he's actually doing nice whites too these days with Uni Blanc and some Claret Blanche and some Picpoul. We've shared some vineyards and stuff over the years with Mr. Pease, and he did his first Mourvedre Rosé this year, which he has yet to introduce me to. But he's doing good work, got a good tasting room. He's good family stuff over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, the Grenache, of course, Tablas Creek, all the same story. The 18, I think, is a really pretty vintage. I haven't tasted this since I opened it, but it's smelling as it should. Beautiful Grenache, pretty.
Right. Yeah. And there's a touch of pepper, a bit of animal, and in a very positive way, of course. And then the mouthfeel, I thought was just fabulous. It's got that kind of nice grippy Grenache tannins that make you want to have a second glass of it. It's really quite delicious.
I think this is. Go back to the oak thing. I think this is something that I find you lose with even a little new oak, is you lose that mouthfeel, that supple mouthfeel, because the tannins from the oak tend to mask the nuances of that to me. And I find that maybe it's just me, but that's what I'm finding. And like I said, I like to drink other people's wine with oak in it, but to put something like this in oak would detract from what I find alluring about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think Grenache and New Wood are just a disaster, in my view. And I'm not much fond of it in Syrah either, actually. But
Syrah is maybe the one that can do it. But yeah, again, we're foodras and big neutral barrels. That's our desires. So with a 10-acre Pinot Noir vineyard, does that mean you're going to be making more Pinot Noir, or your Pinot Noir is the one variety of yours that I don't know that I have had a whole lot of. I tasted it with you in your tasting room, but I think of you more as Syrah and Sauvignon Blanc and that, and Sans Soufre now, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, Pinot Noir is, we've been doing a lot of Pinot for a long time. It's about, whatever, it's about a quarter of our production. And so, we've done as many as 7 different vineyard designated Pinots. We're trying to cut back on that a little bit because it's just too confusing. But we still make, let's see, what do we, we're still making, 3 or 4 single vineyard Pinots along with like a Santa Barbara County blend of as well. And so I like Pinot Noir. It's super delicate, and I think that's what I love about it. And so I'm really going for a pretty delicate style. Now, what's interesting about Faciega, which is this vineyard that I bought, it is a bold vineyard. And what's been interesting there has been to try to figure out how to make a wine, with some finesse from a vineyard that just wants to deliver just a ton of character. And so that's really informed my winemaking. And when I was young, I believed that you had to extract every last drop of character out of the grape skin, and so you'd set up a regime of punching down, mixing up the grapes during the fermentation 3 times a day, every 8 hours, just kill my crew with that. And but Pinot Noir is really different. It doesn't work that way. In fact, I found nothing works that well that way for me. I'm just completely gone from that, because instead of looking to try to extract every last bit of character out of a grape skin, I'm looking for, subtlety, finesse, delicacy, aromatic delicacy as well. And that's what Pinot Noir is all about. And so I found that, like, if you pick it very ripe, you get this big ripe kind of character, and it's very fruity, but it's not very perfumed. And Pinot Noir is all about perfume. And so picking less ripe, the wines are more perfumed. And then like a Faciega, where it's a pretty strong character, we're just not picking it super ripe. And it's like dark and flavorful and everything. But to me, it's a lot more interesting, trying to get it, find its subtle notes.
It's funny you bring that up a couple of years ago, because I was, what do I say? I was taught the regime with Ken Volk back in, when I first started with him back in the early 90s, 3 punch downs a day religiously, that whole situation. And I've backed off immensely since then. And a couple of years ago, I started wondering whether I was just doing it because I'd become lazy, or whether it was an actual, not that I do all the punch downs anyway anymore. But so we did trials with a couple of different batches where we went back to doing, and it did us no favors at all. So we're not going back to that. And everybody was relieved that was the decision we came to.
Yeah. I mean, our wines that we made way back then with just huge extract, I think that they've aged quite well. I don't think they were that great for the first 10, 15 years, but now at 15, 20 years, some of those really hugely extracted wines, they've become more delicate, more finesseful, less kind of confectionery, because I don't like confectionery. I like savory. And so I think they've done all right. I just think what we're doing now is much better. They drink better younger, and I think they will age better, because in the end, they'll have a better balance. It'll be more pleasant.
I would agree with you. And it's funny, though, because the general kind of thought would be those big wines would not age well, but I have seen some of them that show quite well with time. I mean, still not my favorite style by any means, but they do hold up, which I was always under the belief that, those big overmade wines are not going to last. And a lot of them do. They last well, if that's what you're liking. And I agree with you. They kind of lose a bit of that weight as they get older, which I think does them a favor.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the alcohol doesn't go away, and so
it doesn't.
Yeah, they tend to be a little sadder for that high alcohol. But And as far as, whether they age or not, I think it really depends a lot on the, kind of what you're doing in the winery, and when you're picking the grapes. When we were picking very ripe grapes, they weren't extremely ripe. This new kind of, some people are these days pick, they wait to extreme ripenesses, and there, I think when you get way out there, then you sort of lose all balance in the grapes, and wines like that can sort of fall apart instead of age gracefully.
I think on that we can agree. Well, Adam, it's 7:00, so I don't want to rob any more of your Friday night from you. If you want to shamelessly plug your tasting rooms and all that stuff, feel free to do so.
Oh yeah, we do have a tasting room, and so come on by. It's
a beautiful tasting room too, actually, in beautiful town of Ojai. My wife and I really enjoyed that afternoon we spent with. It is Helen, your wife, correct? I get the name right. It was great. We really enjoyed that and wished we could have stayed longer. But it was my first wine tasting as a U.S. citizen right there and then. It was fantastic. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I know Friday night and all that, you're probably going out dancing, but I appreciate it, and I really enjoy speaking with you every time. And I will come down and visit the winery once I've got a stick in the arm from a vaccine or something. So once we're out of this mess, we'll be down to see you.
Okay.
Ian's lurking. All right. Thank you very much, Adam. Be safe. Be well. Thank you.
Great fun.